Welcome to the Happiness Matters podcast, where we'll explore happiness at work and show you how to coach yourself to be happier there and more successful too, no matter what.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode 1.21, and the next step in our mini coaching journey, all about your unhappiness and what to do about it, how to feel better right now. We're doing this work together now as a supplement to what we've done so far in Series 1 for a very good reason. If you are unhappy, if you are in distress right now, and here I am talking away about happiness and success no matter what, then I'm going to lose you. I want us to be able to thoroughly explore the space in between where you are now and your future vision, the happiness and success that you're looking for. I want you to be able to explore the misalignment between the life you're living now, what you're feeling now, and where you'd prefer to be. I want you to explore it fully. So the goal of your coaching is your future vision, your future self. But we don't need to wait to get there. We don't have to put feeling better on hold until somewhere in the distant future of our coaching together. And this is one of the fundamental principles at Happiness Matters, to learn how to feel better on purpose and intentionally, not by overriding our negative emotions with false positivity, but to embrace our negative emotions and learn exactly how to feel better. Now, last week we focused in on your actual negative feelings and started to learn more about them, the difference between feelings, emotions, and sensations. And we took a look at the concept of emotional intelligence, especially the aspect of expanding our emotional range, our emotional repertoire. This week, we're going to expand on the concept of emotional intelligence by looking at the work of some of my own coaching teachers. And we'll circle back to our happiness wisdom concepts and consider these in light of what we've learnt about emotional intelligence and look at negative emotions through these lenses. So you can start listening today and just jump in with me and listen back from episode 1.17. Either way will work. I am seeing each episode as an opportunity to learn another self-coaching capability, a skill or a concept that will add to your toolbox as you learn to coach yourself in the midst of your misalignment with life, in your unhappiness. To go with these insight sessions on coaching your negative emotions, I've created 3 free downloads for you. There's an overview of this How to Feel Better coaching journey. Then there's some quotes from the world's wisdom to inspire you along the way. And then there's my free coaching tool to use as much as you possibly can over this period. 3 long, strong breaths, my personal favorite of all. You'll find everything at Happiness-Matters.coach, and you'll find all the other free coaching tools that go with Series 1 here as well. As always, if you are feeling too unhappy, too swamped by your negative emotions to do this work alone, or if you're not sure of where to start, you can work with me directly. Please book an online coaching session with me right now today, and we can coach on anything that's getting in the way of your happiness and success. I have spaces open every Wednesday, especially for you, my podcast listeners. So to book right now, go to the website Happiness-Matters.coach and click on the yellow button there that says Coach with Julia. I want to bring 3 coaches into our discussions today. They are all 3 teachers of mine, and all 3 run coaching schools. There's Sieler in Australia, who is an ontological coach, Brooke Castillo in North America, who is a life coach, and Marita Fridhjon, who is a relationship systems coach, raised in South Africa and now based in North America. All three have taken wisdom from philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience and brought them into the world of coaching. And I want to bring them into this discussion around emotional intelligence. So we're not taking a purely academic exploration, but we're actually unpacking the skills that will make a difference to your unhappiness today as we coach your negative emotions. Last week, we defined Daniel Goleman's catchphrase emotional intelligence as our capacity to recognize our own emotions, our capacity to recognize the emotions of others, to discern between different feelings and our ability to label them, expanding our emotional repertoire, to use this emotional information to guide our thinking and behavior, and lastly, to adjust our emotions to adapt to environments and to achieve our goals. We're now going to add more depth into these capabilities with Alan, Brooke, and Marita to guide us. Alan Sieler, creator of the Ontological Coaching methodology, adds his intellectual and practical depth to our exploration of emotional intelligence. He's very clear on the role of our emotions and emotional intelligence. As we are emotional beings, there is no escape from emotions. Emotions are present with us throughout our lives. People do not leave their emotions in the car park or on public transport when they go to work. Emotions are an integral part of the human experience and underpin all forms of human action. Thinking, listening, planning, decision-making, speaking, and physical movement are all human actions continually influenced by emotions. To be human is to live in a continual flow of moods and emotions, like a stream of feeling that is intertwined with our desires and preferences. In our everyday busyness, during which we are preoccupied with continual thoughts about tasks at hand, things to be done, what we think of others, and what they think of us, we are often unaware of what is happening in our emotional world and how this shapes the quality of our lives. In his work with emotions and expanding on the concept of emotional intelligence, Alan introduces us to moods, as well as the emotions, feelings, and sensations I spoke about last week. He describes the centrality of moods and our capability for mood management, for profound shifts in our perceptions of what is possible in life and our behavioral effectiveness. There's a word. Especially when we experience emotional disequilibrium or being emotionally off balance. Moods, then, are an extension to the way we defined emotions, feelings, and sensations last week. We can see them as long-term emotional frames of mind, created by deeply held beliefs that are often hidden to us. And these moods are deeply embedded into our very way of being in the world. So they're not just about how we're relating to what's happening to us now, but rather they tell us more about our relationship with our past and our future. Our emotional intelligence is then expanded and deepened when we consider the undercurrent of moods that influence everything we do. Those streams of thought and emotions that are running very quietly underneath our everyday awareness. Alan also offers us the practical idea of becoming emotional learners throughout our lives, expanding and deepening our emotional intelligence ever further. So to be an emotional learner is not to stand at a distance from your emotions and inspect them in a detached manner, although this is very useful and a great first step in developing our EI capabilities. But rather, an emotional learner is someone who is open to fully experiencing their emotions, especially the ones that are not familiar and that are potentially uncomfortable for us. And I'm going to discuss this in an upcoming episode about what I call our possibilities for our next level evolution. As an emotional learner, you are willing to learn to use your emotions to develop the quality of your thinking and your creativity, to develop the quality of your decision making, to develop the quality of your leadership, and the quality of how you respond to challenging situations, as well as the quality of your personal and professional relationships. So powerful. And as an emotional learner, as I say often on this podcast, you'll be practicing always to think, feel, and act on purpose and intentionally. Marita Fridhjon is creator of ORSC, the Organizational and Relationship Systems Coaching methodology that adds further depth to our discussion today. Her work builds onto Goleman's in emotional intelligence, looking at a combination of emotional intelligence, understanding ourselves, social intelligence, SI, understanding others, and relationship systems intelligence, RSI, understanding the systems that we operate in, the groups, teams, communities, our collective intelligence. For us to be effective in our lives, in other words, happy and successful no matter what, all three levels of intelligence are required and need to be considered as interdependent. She introduces us to the idea of a conscious stance that we can take to create an impact in a social group. How aware are we of the impact we are having on others just by our very presence, our conscious stance? She teaches us to increase our ability to read the emotional field within a room, a group, and adjust our stance on purpose and intentionally. Now we'll circle back to these insights from Alan and Marita after we've had a look at how life coach Brooke Castillo adds her clear view to this discussion. She says, "We call ourselves adults, but most of us are still functioning as emotional children. Emotional childhood is when grown adults have not matured past childhood in terms of managing their emotions. This means they react to their emotions, act out or avoid emotions, rather than taking full responsibility and choosing thoughts that will create the emotions they want to experience. So much of our programming is about avoiding feeling any pain. The only way to achieve emotional maturity is through self-responsibility. Emotional adulthood means taking responsibility for our pain and also for our joy, not expecting other people to make us happy, not expecting others to make us feel secure, and appreciating that we are the only ones who can hurt our feelings. Blaming someone else for how we feel is a sure way to hand our emotional power over to another person." I'm going to look at this in more detail, as Brooke's view on emotional childhood cuts through so much noise on EI, EQ, EQI, EL, SI, and RSI, and goes to the heart of the issue, the area that, if we address it, will make the biggest difference to your happiness and success today. What we want to do here is address your emotional intelligence personally, spending our time and our effort together on what is going to most impact your own personal view and your own version of happy and successful no matter what. So let's look at it. Emotional childhood is when grown adults have not matured past childhood in terms of managing their emotions. This means they react to their emotions, act out, or avoid emotions. Before you quickly dismiss this as, "This is not me," it's worth taking a few seconds to think about when it's you. We are not in emotional childhood all the time, but we are all in emotional childhood some of the time, in pockets of our lives. And it's these pockets that we want to address in coaching, as much of your unhappiness will be originating from here. So let's break it down a little more. Children and teenagers develop their emotional maturity as they encounter the difficulties of the world, react to them, and then learn how to respond to the world. This maturity is part of our natural development and growth, part of our journey to adulthood. Now notice I've used the words react and respond differently. Keep this in mind as I'm going to use it throughout our coaching together. React or respond. So to put it incredibly simply, at the start of our development when we're children, something happens outside in the world and we react automatically to it. These automatic responses are linked to our very survival, the fight, flight, and freeze reactions. This is wired into our brains at the primitive brain level. The primitive brain level is all about your survival and avoiding pain and moving towards pleasure. We're going to talk way more about your primitive brain and about pain and pleasure throughout this podcast. For now, see if you can find some examples of how you automatically move towards pleasure and away from pain. Do you dislike feedback sessions with your team or even your own manager and put them off whenever you can? How about that irritating person who's at the coffee machine? Do you turn around and go somewhere else and avoid them? How tired are you at the end of the working day, and what do you do to relax? Everything we do is a reaction to pleasure or pain. Unless we have consciously taken it out of our automatic brain, our primitive brain, looked at it and decided to change it. The National Geographic explores the emotional brain in an article called The Dark Side. The brain's supersensitivity to negative emotions emerged at the dawn of the human species. Fear, anxiety, and anger prepared the body for fight or flight. Negative emotions affect the brain more powerfully than positive feelings do. Depending on the results that this flight, fight, freeze reaction has for you, your brain will modify your behavior. If it works for you and keeps you safe, it will reinforce that behavior. But if it brings more negativity, it will try something different. So instead of freezing, you might flee next time. If fighting works for you, you'll continue to fight, becoming more argumentative, less flexible, and more demanding as you reinforce the brain pattern over time. This is where Alan's work looking at your underlying moods is exceptional, as he is unpacking these patterns that have developed over the long term and lie just below our immediate consciousness. So that's the first part of being an emotional child. Now let's look at taking full responsibility, self-responsibility. The only way to achieve emotional maturity is through self-responsibility. Emotional adulthood means taking responsibility for our pain and also for our joy, not expecting other people to make us happy, not expecting others to make us feel secure, and appreciating that we are the only ones who can hurt our feelings. Blaming someone else for how we feel is a sure way to hand over our emotional power to someone else. These ideas are so different to what we're typically taught about the world. Taking responsibility for our pain. No one else is to blame for your feelings of sadness, unhappiness, frustration, and anger, only you. Taking responsibility for our pleasure. No one else is responsible for you feeling happy, secure, loved, valued, engaged. Only you. And how about this one? We are the only ones who can hurt our feelings. Think about all the ways we are socialized into a powerless way of viewing ourselves, all the messages we are getting as children as we grow up and as adults right now. My mother hurt my feelings. My husband, my partner, is not meeting my needs. I don't feel loved. I don't feel attractive. He should be more romantic, more loving. My manager must do this so I'm more engaged and committed at work. That new guy makes me so angry. You are the only one who hurts your feelings. You are the only one who can meet your needs for love and safety. and you are the only one who creates feelings of commitment and engagement. Now, you might not agree with me. It's so not easy to see it in ourselves. But it's most likely the secret to everything. All your pain, all your difficult emotions, and all your unhappiness. So stay with me here on the podcast, because we're going to do this work together. The minute you blame someone else for how you are feeling, or something else, the company, the economy, your horrid work colleague, your ex-husband, you are handing over your emotional power to another. Your power and how you feel today. You become the victim and you are no longer in control of your happiness. And now, let's look at the last part of emotional adulthood and being emotionally intelligent. Choosing thoughts that will create the emotions you want to experience on purpose and intentionally. Adjusting our emotions to adapt and achieve our goals. So, you'll be choosing thoughts that will create the feelings of engagement, the feelings of commitment and flow. You can choose the thoughts that will create the feelings of love and value and worth. And you can choose the thoughts that will create the feelings of happiness and success. Of course, we've heard this. Along these lines, your thoughts create your reality. And it's easy to go, yes, yes. But have you thought about how profound this is at every level? You are a meaning-making being. We even make meanings out of emojis, if you listen to that episode. Things happen in the world and you make them mean something that either creates pain for you or happiness for you. It's as simple as that. And if you don't like that feeling, you can choose a different thought to create a different meaning to those events. As an example, let's look at what you think about your colleague who causes you some frustration and sometimes anger. What do you think about him? You might be thinking, he's rude, he's obnoxious, he's got no EQ, he treats me with no respect, he makes me feel angry. Ask yourself, how are these thoughts about him making you upset, making you angry? And the key in all of this is that these are your thoughts. They're not facts. This guy probably has a wife who loves him. He has children who love him. There will be many people in the company that really value spending time with him. So the question to ask yourself is, are these thoughts of yours serving you, getting you what you want, getting you the result you want? I promise we will spend much more time in our coaching together in how we actually do this. Because this is not about thought swapping. Happiness Matters is not just about be positive or change your thought. I am coaching you on happiness no matter what. Not forced positivity, but authentic, long-lasting, profound happiness, no matter what happens in your life, even grief and anger and your current unhappiness. This is the coaching work of our next episode on our happiness wisdom concept, life is 50-50, the yin-yang of our lives. For now, why not look at the thought and feeling download you did in episode 1.19? Have a look at the thoughts you see there and ask yourself whether these thoughts are getting you the results you want in your life. Are they coming from a place of reaction or response, from a place of emotional childhood or emotional intelligence? There are some really big concepts here from Alan, Brooke, and Marita, and I don't want to lose you at this stage. Please don't get lost in self-recrimination for the way you've been thinking. Don't be dismissive because you've seen something I've said today in a social media meme. We will revisit this many times throughout our happiness coaching together. Now, for the purposes of our work here in coaching your negative emotions, I've introduced the concept of emotional intelligence, moods, relationship systems, and emotional childhood as cognitive tools for you to consider and to increase your awareness of what might be happening in your unhappiness. So let's now briefly apply our happiness wisdom concepts, the happiness paradox, happiness adaptation, and our happiness set point as part of our coaching on how to feel better. In the first happiness wisdom concept, we learned about the paradox of pursuing happiness and why we want to pursue happiness indirectly. We covered this in detail in episode 1.3, Where Do You Want to Be? The happiness paradox, or the paradox of hedonism, refers to the practical difficulties encountered in the pursuit of pleasure. Researchers have looked into our pursuit of pleasure, what we call hedonic pleasure, as the short-term satisfaction of our desires. They explored the difficulties experienced when actually pursuing pleasure on purpose did not yield the most pleasure. In other words, when pursuing pleasure, we feel no increase in pleasure and might even feel less. So our pursuit of pleasure ends up with us being even more frustrated. And it's a paradox simply because happiness is what we all want more than anything. And yet if we pursue what we typically think brings us happiness, hedonic pleasure, we end up being less happy. In our next happiness wisdom concept, we looked at the hedonic treadmill, hedonic adaptation, and your ability to change your happiness set point. This was in episode 1.4, going deeper into your happiness. The hedonic treadmill theory compares the pursuit of pleasure to a person on a treadmill who has to keep walking just to stay in the same place. In other words, you keep chasing pleasure and avoiding pain, but the actual pursuit might just find you staying in the same place, working hard to move forward, but never actually getting there. The hedonic treadmill is expanded with hedonic adaptation, which explores the idea of the same place in more detail. Researchers have observed the tendency of humans to quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness, despite major positive or negative events or life changes. And some researchers have taken this still further to explore the concept of a happiness set point. And this is the idea that we all return to the same level of happiness no matter what happens to us. We'll always just go back to where we were before, a bit like having a happiness thermostat inside of us. Other researchers have gone so far as to create a formula for our happiness, 50-40-10, for example, where 50% of our happiness is set genetically, 10% is determined from where we are born, and 40% is up for us to create. So interesting. Now that we've revisited these happiness wisdom concepts, let's ask ourselves some powerful coaching questions as they relate to your unhappiness in light of this, and then draw on everything we've been learning about emotional intelligence last week and this week. What does this all mean for us here in coaching our unhappiness and our negative emotions now? Especially when we consider existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre saying, an emotion is a transformation of the world. I've got 10 questions for you to consider as you coach yourself this week around this big topic of your emotional immaturity and your emotional adulthood. I will include these in the show notes, just in case you can't make notes right now. If you think these through, you will be well on your way to coaching your unhappiness, your negative emotions, using all the emotional intelligence wisdom you've gained today. So let's get started. First of all, how much are you able to think beyond your unhappiness, or is it all encompassing? 2. What role is your emotional intelligence playing in your unhappiness right now? 3. Are you on the hedonic treadmill when it comes to wanting to get rid of your unhappiness? 4. Is your definition of happiness just an opposite to unhappiness, a reaction to your unhappiness, just the absence of your happiness? 5. How much unhappiness is part of your happiness set point? Is your unhappiness a predominant mood at work, at home? 6. What emotions do you experience when you consider opening yourself up to different, more uncomfortable emotional experiences? How willing are you to be an emotional learner with these feelings? 7. How is your social intelligence and your relationship systems intelligence held back when you are operating from emotional child? Where are the pockets in your life where you show up as an emotional child? Where are you powerful in your life? And where are you handing over your power to others, to your company? In what situations do you expect others to meet your needs and expectations to help you feel better? And 10, in what situations do you allow others to affect your feelings? If you want to get to your underlying thoughts on all of these questions, also ask yourself why at the end of each of them. As an example, so in what situation do I expect others to meet my needs and expectations? Why? This will give you good insight into the assumptions, beliefs, and thoughts you have running around in your brain. And that gives us great material to coach going forward. And then lastly, consider your emotional intelligence and all that you have learnt and how you might bring alive the words of Luc de Clapier, French writer and moralist, that emotions have taught mankind to reason. Wow, what a lot to consider on emotional intelligence and your happiness and success. Today was a big session. Thank you for listening. Remember, if you need help with your negative emotions, you have 3 options. You can download my free coaching tool, 3 Long Strong Breaths. You can book a once-off session with me on Wednesday, or you can join us coaching on Facebook at Happiness-Matters.coach. There really is no better time to do this work together. Before you go, please remember to subscribe to the Happiness Matters podcast to get our Tuesday episodes delivered to you automatically. Also, Fraser and I would appreciate you reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple user and iTunes if you're an Android user. Thank you in advance for paying this coaching forward to anyone who works and wants to be happier and more successful. Next week, we're revisiting the happiness wisdom concept that's core to our philosophy at Happiness Matters, talking about it exclusively next week and how it applies to your negative emotions. Life is 50-50 and the yin-yang of our life. Bye for now from a very wet spring morning. So much rain. Our dams are at 90% and hopefully Cape Town's long drought is now over.
Thanks for joining us on this Happiness Matters podcast. Do join us again here next week on Tuesday. You can subscribe to this series at Apple Podcasts on iTunes, or you can sign up for it on our website, Happiness-Matters.coach. That's Happiness-Matters.coach. COACH. Also, you can join our conversation on Facebook by following us there. Our Facebook page is also Happiness-Matters.coach.